Incoming.
Hello, friends. Welcome back to From the Bunker. Eli here. I'll be hosting today. And we have a friend of mine from back in my California days with us today, Aaron Siebert. He is a retired U.S. Navy Chief Petty Officer. He was a hospital corpsman. He's a Purple Heart recipient. Got that during 3 tours in Iraq. And since then, he's been doing a lot of great work in the veterans space. That's how we met. He is the vice president of the Warrior Built Foundation, which is super cool. I'm excited for you guys to hear about that if you don't already know. He's the vice president of Recon Chief Inc., founder and host of Combat Vet Vision Podcasts, which is live on Tuesdays, I believe. So make sure you guys check that out. We'll talk more about that. And he definitely collaborates with a lot of other nonprofits. And so I wanted to bring him on today to tell his, his story of service, what it's like to be, Purple Heart recipient and go through injuries and come out of that, and then really get into what he's done with his life since then, which is how we met years ago. And just someone I definitely look up to in the community, and he's just always around doing great things for our brothers and sisters. So Aaron, welcome to the show. Thanks for coming on.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's great to be here. Appreciate it.
All right. So first question is going to be, how did you end up in the military?
Well, I grew up in a small farm in Wyoming and raised goats and chickens, dogs, a whole bunch of cool things. Little Britches rodeo. I rode a little cow. I did have a cow on our land too. But as I grew up, I was watching cool movies like Top Gun, Navy SEALs, and I said, hey, that's maybe something I want to do. I had a high school sweetheart that her father was a Vietnam pilot, F4s, vigilantes, David Albert McRae. And he inspired me to necessarily, kind of want to push down the air side of this things. But, as I started watching Navy SEALs and doing these other things, I was like, hey, maybe I want to do something like that. So I already knew what I wanted to do. I was tired of school. I was going to high school, enjoyed that, played football, all conference, all state. And, but I didn't want to go to college with my friends. I was like, man, I was nose guard. I was a beast.
Nice.
I really enjoyed the hunt of the quarterback. And so, yeah, it was quite a thing, but I really enjoyed just having my life kind of laid out. And I was like, hey, you know what? I'm tired of school. I have dyslexia, so sometimes it's very difficult for me to stay on task and stay coordinated with all the different letters and numbers and different things.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd have to study extra hard. I couldn't skip like the rest of my friends. They were like, I'm going to skip school a little bit. It's like, what? How can you do that? It's like, no, I can't. I got to make sure I am there for the test so I can get my C or D, and turn in all my homework. But, it was very difficult at times, but these are some of the struggles as a kid that you just try to navigate and you try to figure it out. And I'm like, hey man, I'm tired of school. I'm gonna join the Navy, just to find out that I was back in school from day one, with a whole lot of exercise involved and a whole lot of extra stuff. And it was great. I mean, I loved it. I loved the camaraderie, the whole thing. I don't know. I just loved the just being able to accomplish missions and learning all these different things that were super important. And it wasn't like I was going to be, because I joined with the intent to kind of go down the SEAL route. And they're like, well, you could be a bosun's mate, you could be a corpsman or something else. I can't remember, but I was like, well, what's a corpsman? And they're like, hey, this is a medical guy. He can go anywhere in the Marine Corps and anywhere in the Navy. And I said, hey, sign me up. And so I did. I should have signed up 365 days before, because you can do that. But if you don't know that, I signed up like literally while I was getting out, and they're like, hey, this would have counted for some time in service kind of thing. It's kind of a weird benefit, that 365 days. But you don't find out some of these things until you've already kind of processed this stuff.
Yeah.
So I joined, but then I was going to take a trip out to California, hang out with my aunt, my mom, who lived in Bellflower. And so for that summer, I kind of hung out and got to go to the beach, do a bunch of stuff. In July, 17th of 1991, went into boot camp, and there I was in the Navy, just kind of like going, "Hey, man, this is a lot like prison. I'm pretty sure because if we jump over the fence, they said we're going to be in the Marine Corps, which I ended up in the Marine Corps anyways as a hospital corpsman, FMF corpsman. Or if you want to leave, you can, but it's kind of a hard thing to do. But I was like watching all these airplanes fly over and San Diego, going, "Wow, man, I wonder where all these people are going. They're enjoying their lives. Here I am scrubbing some floor, doing push-ups and sit-ups and running every day and going to school, going to more school on learning the Navy's traditions, the way of life, and all the different things that we got to learn."
I
So
think the I had a similar experience because I was on the other side of the fence 13 years later. But I will say I was always very proud of the fact, like I don't mind saying it, that the Marine Corps is a department of the Navy, and I feel like the tradition. I mean, the Marine Corps is a cult, you know that, but I feel like the naval traditions are, started that, and like they just built on it more, I think. But my grandfather was in the Navy, and my dad was a Marine, and I I always really liked being part of the fleet. Like I never got to do anything in the water. I was in the desert the whole time, but I always thought it would be cool, and I liked the amphibious side of it. And I always really liked naval traditions, so I'm always very curious talking to Navy veterans about things like that. And I think it's a culture that's really cool. Having been in the Army Guard, for 17 years, and I just retired, but I really felt like the esprit de corps and like the culture of getting to know the history was pushed a lot more in the Marine Corps, and I would guess in the Navy as well.
yeah, not so much in the Navy. I mean, it is to a point, but I remember how special it was when I was going through FMSS or Field Medical Service School, and how special it was when I was going through to get my FMF warfare device, Fleet Marine Force warfare
Yeah.
device. Those the history of the Marine Corps is so embedded into the Marine Corps that if there's one service that can carry on the patriotism equal to all services put together, it's the Marine Corps,
Yeah.
because they alone have some of the coolest traditions. Obviously the Marine Corps ball. You don't hear about the Navy ball so much; it gets kind of washed out. The Air Force probably has a ball. I mean, I've never even heard of it, but they do. I mean, I'm not going to be able to. Who knows what the Space Force is having a ball in the moons? In I think they're planning it in 3031 or something like that. I don't know, but it's these kind of traditions really matter, and you don't really know it until you're actually embedded with something that's really special. And the Marine Corps is something special to me. I mean, my whole Navy really evolved around the Marine Corps. I mean, I wanted to be pushing for the Navy SEAL, but I got a girlfriend, and I was like, man, I don't really want to go and do all that stuff. But hey, I'll go with the Marine Corps. Let's do it. I got to go to a special school for that, FMSS, after Corps school, which I accomplished. To be a corpsman, you got to go to the school for medicine, and you get to learn a whole bunch of medicine. It's super important. But when you go to Field Medical Service School, it's a Marine Corps school. It's owned by the Marine Corps, but you're learning field medicine, adapt and overcome, this whole theories of utilize what you got, because your bag is only so big and you can only carry so much. So you have to use a whole bunch of other items and things to really kind of navigate, medical treatment and get somebody put away and back packaged up so that they can go home safely. So, just learning trauma and all the things that we have to learn, super important. And then the Marine Corps Customs, dedication, all the different things that you learn to be in a Marine Corps school. You have your advisors are a Marine Corps um, uh, member and a Navy member, so it's hand in hand. And so you're learning a lot about a lot of really cool things. And after that, to do the Field Medical Service FMF warfare device, you have to relearn all that stuff to even a higher level, and the histories and
Okay.
traditions that matter. And then you get then you get boarded to get that Field Medical FMF FM, FMF pin, Fleet Marine Force
Oh,
pin, warfare device. So
yeah.
it's quite a deal.
That's cool, man. Well, and back in the days when you had to polish your boots and stuff, I never had to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, because the suede boots came into effect and you don't polish suede, you just brush it off. And it's kind of like, hey, there's my boots, they're looking great. But yeah, I had, shining shoes in the Navy, shining, brass in the Navy, shining, your boots in the Marine Corps. Cause yeah, I was with the old school, you know, put the polish on them and buff them off really well. So it was a lot.
Yeah.
But I will say, some of the coolest things, right? I mean, I watch movies and I was like, hey, that's what I want to do. That's going to be really cool. But I will say my first introduction to Field Medical Service School on Camp Pendleton on Del Mar, the first day, you get there and you kind of live in there and you're just kind of like waiting for your day and you're just like cleaning up all day and you're like doing these kind of like you're running and doing exercise. You got a pretty extensive day, even though you're
Hmm.
waiting to class up. But the first day of that class up, when you have to go out in formation and they got you, hey, you're in your Alpha company, Bravo company, whatever it is, right? And you're you're in platoons. I'm sorry, platoons. So whatever platoon you're in, you just find yourself like, okay, whatever. The first day at 4:30 in the morning, is wake up call, and it's pouring rain, like crazy rain. In California, you only get so much rain. There's a rainy
Yep.
season, December type thing. I can't remember when I formed up in there, but I stepped out and it was raining so high. But there was a guy next to me who's about 6'4", and so I probably scooted a little bit closer to him as the wind's blowing, it's crossing over, and it's just pouring. And we're standing in our dungarees, and dungarees just our blue jeans and this blue shirt that we wear. It's Old Navy uniform. Not even sure they bring that into effect anymore. And our you know Dixie cup hat, and we're standing out there and it's just pouring rain. And I remember Gunnery Sergeant Coons, this guy, he was from Vietnam. His medical record partially burned up in a fire somewhere one time, and this guy was about 6'8", and he'd stand up there and he's like, "All right, reach into your front left pocket, sorry, pull out your ID card because you're supposed to have it there." And so there's all these people pulling out their ID card. And he's like, "All right, leave your ID card in your hand if you have that. Keep it up there high. If you don't, go get your ID card right now." And then he's like, "For all of you that are standing out here, you're get on your face. You're gonna push, and you're pushing for your weakest links." so so we're like doing push-ups in this pouring rain, just getting drenched. And I was thinking to myself, I'm like, on day one, this is your introduction to the Marine Corps. He's like, this is your transition from Navy blues to Marine Corps greens. And it's such a cool statement. And it's just something, and you're just hating life at the time. But when you look back at something like that, you're just like, wow, that was a magical moment. There was something really cool about it. And, you can't really appreciate it. It's, you see it on the movies and you're just like, wow. So then I'm like, wow, man, this is just like the movies, but damn, it sucks.
Dude, that's so super interesting to me to hear that from someone coming through as a corpsman in your position, because that's literally just like what our boot camp's like the whole time. And then the fleet's all just going to depend on your leadership. And you were also at an earlier time when things, let's be real, it gets softer every year or two. But um,
Yeah, that's definitely
when
true, and that's one of those things. Like I was like, wow, this is I'd rather have this sucky time right here and now, and everything else is going to be easy. And it really kind of, you look back at it, and it really was. I would say those kind of days, those kind of things, they kind of, and that's really a miniature boot camp. That's a Marine Corps boot camp for the Navy corpsmen to go into the Marine Corps. You don't
yeah,
you earn the title as doc after you graduate that school, and we literally wear the Eagle, Globe, and Anchor on our uniforms, which is a very sacred item from the Marine Corps. And so,
yeah,
I often tell people, I'm like, I'm not in the Marine Corps, but I play like I am most of my time in the military. My
yeah. I
Navy
mean,
was the Marine Corps.
yeah. When
And
you're
then
a
I tell
corpsman,
people all the time
you're a
too,
Marine.
I'm pretty sure I got more time in the Marine Corps than you do. And then I look at these Marines, I'd be like, but you might have more time in the Navy than I do. Meaning
Dude, so
they might have
what?
been on a ship a lot more than me.
Yeah. So you got in '91 and then you do your training and stuff. And what was that time period
The
like up?
90 93 90 yeah, 93, I went through FMSS and
Okay,
then went to Okinawa right away, Charlie Company and Med Battalion. Did a year over there doing some stuff. Came back with 3rd Med Battalion, 1st Med Battalion on Camp Pendleton. And, my being with Group or MLG now, Marine Logistics Group, or
okay.
FSG at the time.
What,
Yeah.
what was your time like, was your first time Iraq? Did you do the invasion or did you do any other stuff before that?
Yeah, I was with 3rd Battalion, 5th Marines, and obviously with division at the time, that's a divisional unit, and it's out of um, Camp Pendleton, and we had to go. It was like, hey, we're gonna go. I remember 9/11 kicking off, and I was
Mhm.
literally hearing that the Twin Towers had fallen, and I was like, Twin Towers, where? I mean, I couldn't imagine that America was going to fall, right? That America's towers are falling. I'm like,
Yeah,
yeah, what's getting hit? Where? What country? And then to find out that this is the situation, but we were already set to go with the 31st MEU. So before that, we were already deployed over to Okinawa again and did this 31st MEU. And that's kind of like another deployment. And then finally it's like, hey, we got to go set up and we're going to Iraq. And so we geared up for that. And I remember we trained all this weird ways before, and training all of a sudden changed. Everything changed. They're like, hey, we're going to train like this because this is how we're going to fight. It's like, well, we should have trained like this the whole time. So a lot of things changed, but we geared up for it. And here we are, we're going into Iraq and possibly, but we're going to Kuwait. We're going to set up, we're staging, and we end up going into Kuwait, and we start training. We're doing all this training. I was at ACU 5, big base. They kind of set it up. We had all these circus tents out there. We were gearing up for all this stuff, and we'd go to this training area and hang out there for a couple weeks at a time, and then come back because it's like, hey, we're getting ready to go into Iraq, but they have to build up. They have to send a whole bunch of things, a lot of equipment over there. And I remember the night of the departure, and 3-5's just kind of hanging back, and they're holding fast, and everybody's on the road, and the only vehicles you see is military vehicles, fuel trucks I've never seen before, things that I've never seen before, uh, equipment, and we're setting up um, like we're circling wagons, and so we got these, like old school out in the desert, and we got all the horses on the outside, but it's all trucks and vehicles and stuff.
yeah,
And I remember there was, rules of engagement were a certain way, and things were kind of weird. And I remember this vehicle that cruised across the desert in the middle of the desert and then rolled right through our freaking uh our wagon, our circled wagons. And I was like, hey, nobody even decided to stop this thing. What? And it's so weird. It was random. And it's because we're told to do a certain thing, and nobody really knew what this vehicle was about, and they just let it cruise through. And I remember, it was kind of like, what would the enemy be doing, or what would anybody be doing? Testing our boundaries, testing this or that. But I don't think we were kind of prepared to, like, hey, we gotta stop this vehicle and make it stop. Okay, what's it doing? Maybe it's supposed to be here and it's going to drive, but then it continues just driving through the desert. And I'm like, that is very strange. So I saw a couple strange things. It was crazy. And then we rolled through. We started rolling through, and every time we'd stop, we'd still let all these vehicles pass in between. Well, they're like, hey, we got to stop these vehicles. No joke. I pull out my 9mm. I stopped this tomato truck in the middle of the thing. I'm like, hey, man, I'm starting to feel unsafe. This is crazy. And the Marines finally take it over. But the guys were deadly afraid of me with a pistol, 9mm,
yeah,
because that's usually an execution weapon in Iraq. So
yeah. They
they got
didn't
out of the
care about
truck,
your
and it was
rifles, right,
super
dude?
nutty, but they checked out the tomato truck and then let it go. And then they started stopping the vehicles. And so it was kind of a cool thing. But we rolled all the way through some really crazy things that happened, one morning as we're getting ready to go into Baghdad. I'm sure if you talk to anybody that was on the freeway getting ready to go into Baghdad that day, the artillery started popping off early morning at 0400, and it's sending rounds into Baghdad, just whatever it's taking out targets. And helicopters are flying down the middle of the freeway. We're driving down the freeway, and those guns are just popping, and you're just watching these rounds red into the sky, and it was I think there was at least 4 batteries there, if not more, that was just lined up, and they were just popping these rounds left and right, and, they just you know, let it go, so that when we got there, the shock and awe was in effect. We were able to, take our settle up everything, take over the area, secure the area, and make sure we're posting up. And then we went beyond that. We went into Saddam City, and then from there we decided to come back down and secure a bunch of stuff. 2 weeks later, we're in Diwania, I think, or not too long after that, and we're basically setting up and getting ready to go back because we've secured the country. So it was pretty according to everything.
Yeah.
We've secured the country. We're going to head
What
back. Head back. It was
what
cool.
what company were you in 3-5?
Uh, I was in. I started off in headquarters company. Yeah, I was a
Oh, okay.
headquarters company in
My
3-5. So
recruiter
I wasn't with.
yeah, my
Yeah,
recruiter was India Company 3-5 in the invasion, and then, like, came straight
yeah,
from deployment to recruiting school to me, so he was still ramped up, like, we're still friends. He retired as a first sergeant. I went to his retirement on Camp Pendleton in my Army uniform, dude. I was like and that
nice.
was so weird, bro. I'm back at Camp Pendleton, and I'm just like I was like, "Whatever, dude." So I went, and then his, his sergeant major was my gunny from my Iraq deployment, 2 I'm like,
Yeah,
"What's up?"
who's your sergeant major?
My battalion sergeant major or that
Yeah,
my
who did?
gunny
Yeah,
my
no, no.
company gunny,
Who was? Yeah, yeah, or your company gunny? Who was it?
Ferrer.
Okay,
So
Ferrer.
he
I don't know if I know
I went
him.
to Iraq 05, 06, and then,
Yeah, I went.
uh yeah.
My
But,
second time was '04, and then
okay,
'06 was my last. Oh 05, oh
okay.
06.
Did you, yeah. So I just had to ask in case you knew him. That would have been funny because small place, you know. But, yeah, Alamis was my recruiter, Sergeant Allen. He was an E5 on that deployment. But,
Mm.
yeah, dude. So that had I mean, I can't imagine seeing that, just being part of that big invasion. Just that's wild, man. The amount of firepower you had with you, and you see that military force. I mean, I've done a lot of big training exercises, and on deployments, I haven't had to have a lot of huge backup or anything. So, but to see that doing the big like attacks and all that kind of stuff, and seeing it combined ours all together is always super cool. But I can't imagine what that looked like on that invasion, dude. That'd be insane.
It was quite, crazy at times, man. I just remember caches being blown up. I remember vehicles just cooking, as we're driving by, they're just kinda puttering out or fully on fire. Even the oil rigs, the oil being on fire, man, that was the oil lines are just crazy. And I mean, the flame is literally probably 100 yards going up into the sky, and
Wow.
you're driving by it, and you're like 100 yards away from it, and it feels like a heater is on, like a mad heater. I just and you're just like, "Whoa." And I there was just so many strange things, and I can't even keep track of it all in my mind. It seems like it's so surreal or unreal in so many ways that you kind of forget about it because you're like, how do I explain this to anybody in any kind of way, shape, or form that's going to be logical or um that's acceptable in society today, right? Where does it fit? Where do I fit? How does that fit in? And you're like, man, I don't think I should explain this to everybody because it's just going to waste their time, or they're not going to grasp it, and they're just going to give you this look, and then they're going to want to move on to some other story because it sounds too crazy, right? So it gets kind of crazy like that, and that's really what happens. So
That's why
you know,
I think it's cool to have brothers and sisters who've been down the same path and can understand it, which is, big reason we both do what we do and everything. Tell us a little bit more about like your next couple deployments, and you know, I'm if you're cool talking about it, like
oh,
what it
definitely,
looks
I'm
like.
cool about talking with about everything. Yeah. So my next deployment, I was asked. to go back because they didn't have enough guys or somebody to go, and so I was asked to go back and be part of Colonel Durant, which was Coyote 6. He was the guy that was running camp all the training out at 29 Palms, and he was back in country in Iraq doing some incredible stuff. We actually were part a platoon size element that was basically selected to go back and be a security force for Colonel Durant. And we just drove around all the time, wherever he needed to go, wherever he needed to be. And we were his security detachment. And we were basically going around telling the Iraqis, hey, how's the how's the police standing up? And we'd go to the police in Ramadi because that's where we were at. We were basically in Blue Diamond. And we were basically just driving around every day, 6 days a week. And we get some downtime. We go to the range and shoot some stuff. We do a whole bunch of different training things. But, we got to see Saddam's mosque was right in there, and it took a J dam all the way through it. And so it's all like kind of caved in, but most of it's still utilized and being functionally utilized by the Marine Corps. They're setting up spaces and offices in there and they're doing stuff. And so it was really kind of surreal and cool at the same time. But, a lot of people are like, hey man, where'd you live in Iraq and how was it? I was like, well, I lived in a gated community and people were dying to get in there. Uh, sometimes they would try to, attack the base, but we had, security set up pretty well. But we'd go out all the time. We had 5 vehicles that we fell in when we got there, and all 5 of them were broken, and they were like from 1981, and they were macked up partially. They weren't even macked up all the way. They had macked doors on them, so they were welded doors. They're, they just had no window in it, but it kind of came up, and it was like a 1-inch thick door. That was the armor on the vehicles that we fell in on, and we're driving around, we're trying to and we make all these systems so that we can tow a vehicle, we can do this, but these vehicles weren't really geared and designed to carry as much weight as they were, let alone
Yeah.
tow another vehicle. So our vehicles were down a lot. We had to get new engines, all kinds of weird stuff. And
Dude,
not to mention even the vehicle I went to war in, the very first vehicle, I was driving a medical vehicle, but that vehicle alone was missing 12 teeth on the flywheel. So sometimes I'd go to start it and it'd be like, bzzz, bzzz. So jump out real quick, throw the hood open, roll that wheel over a couple turns, and then get back in and start it up, and we'd be going. So the whole time during the war, that's what I did. And so
dude, it's
that was
funny.
part one.
It's
And
fun to talk about that because uh, when I was there 05, 06, when we started, we fell in on like, the L-shaped thin armor. What
yeah, the
it's not
Eldors,
really
they're
armor.
called
And
Eldors.
then, yeah. And
Yeah,
then people,
Eldors.
sandbags in the back and a pintle with the machine gun.
Yeah,
And
sandbags on the
then,
floor.
yeah.
Yep.
And then while we were there, we rotated out. We had one of those left. We had all the bolt-on armor kits, but the suspension and the engine weren't upgraded. So you're just like, you would get
Yeah.
stuck on a curb.
Yeah, it was super nutty. And so, yeah, I remember, things were starting to kick off too. We would always have to drive uh a whole bunch of different routes to go from Ramadi to wherever we had to go. And
Yeah.
we started getting IED'd. Matter of fact, one of the IEDs hit Colonel Durant's vehicle. The gunner in there had to get medical attention. You know, even Colonel Durant took some shrapnel to his neck. It's kind of a weird too. And I remember the pattern was really strange. So what really it looked like it did was it was spinning because you would see normally striations. That was, and these are the kind of surreal things that I'm talking about. And striations meaning like if a cat scratches you, it goes one way, right? And usually if a piece of
Okay.
shrapnel or a bullet goes by you or something and hits you, it'd be one way. Well, his neck had striations in multiple different directions. So it's almost like it came up, it stamped him and then bounced off or went somewhere. And so,
Whoa.
just trying to scientifically map this stuff out in my head, there was just so many things that I saw that were so surreal. It's like, man, how do you tell the story? How do you even, you know? And it
Wow.
was before it got, it didn't. He's lucky. He just took a really, small, you know, bit of shrapnel to his neck, and not the whole piece, obviously. And then you look at all these things that happen, and you're glad that everybody made it, or most of us did, or whatever the situation is. But we started getting IED'd a lot, and we started taking on sometimes small arms fire, but you know, we kept going. But I was also involved in the largest firefight in Al Ramadi since the major war had stopped. Was when we had to go to meet the Fallujah Brigade. And this is probably the most intense fight that I was in is we had to leave one night and we had to grab some Army Bradleys, a whole Army company of vehicles. And they came with us to in the middle of the night to go knock on the Fallujah Brigade's door. And the Fallujah Brigade is kind of like our friends, but they're, you don't know because 10% of everybody was kind of bad. So you couldn't really trust everything. So
Yeah.
we took and knocked at the door in the middle of the night, like we're knocking on the gate. Boom, boom, boom. Hey, we got to come in. And we basically had to go secure all these weapons. So we secured a whole bunch of AK-47s with thousands and thousands of rounds too. And as we're leaving, we got to head back all the way through Ramadi to Blue Diamond. And as we're heading there, we go by Saddam Mosque and we take some RPGs, small arms fire. We end up in this huge firefight. And, we're behind the L doors, dust is kicking up, things are going on wrong. We have this 50 cal on our that's just like the oldest 50 cal I've ever seen. I've always heard of these things. The timing's never right on it. So they couldn't get it up and running. And so I'm like, hey, don't worry about it. Just, let's do the best with what we got. And then right, right in our line of fire, here comes a Bradley just cruising through, to basically block our flank and do some stuff. But then we have to immediately quit firing because I'm like, dude, who runs in your fire, in your left and right
Yeah.
lateral limits? It just was kind of crazy. So there were some other crazy things that the Army did too, like integrate into when we're driving down the road, they would integrate we got 5 vehicles. We're in a convoy. Then they have a convoy too, but they're just going to integrate in with our convoy. So the vehicle that you're supposed to be following is no longer the vehicle you're supposed to be following. So that was kind of nutty. So there's some like real nutty things. I'm not going to be too harsh on the Army. They did some good stuff. I mean, they were doing great stuff out there. But it was just some unusual things. Like we do convoys all the time and we were very specific about how we operated and we'd pull
Yeah.
in and, have to do all these things. But we just did all that. And that was my second time. I had to come back early because I really wasn't supposed to be there for too long anyway. I was promised that I'd only be there for, a short time. And so my chief back was like, hey, yeah, we need to send somebody that hasn't gone. And they sent somebody out. But we had bullet holes in our vehicles. We had all kinds of stuff. And I finally flew back and prepared for my next journey, which was to go with the 3rd Brigade MIT team. And at the time, I was supposed to go to Etzen Range. And I really was thinking to myself, I was like, man, I don't want to go to Etzen Range. I'm 3rd
Yeah.
Battalion, 5th Marines. And I'm going to get at Etzen Range, and they're going to just, because the war's still going and everything's kind of crazy, they're just going to snag me up real quick and send me with a unit that I'm not familiar with. So I'd rather
Mm-hmm.
stay at 3-5 and do something. And they're like, well, you can stay
Yeah.
at 3-5 because 3-5 is going to deploy at the same time these MIT teams, and you could be with a MIT team. So I signed up to be part of this MIT team. And in the first 24 hours, there was an officer on our team, 10 man. There was an officer that turned in his retirement papers and a master sergeant that also turned in his retirement papers, just because it was going to be such a dangerous mission. I mean, obviously, a 10-man MIT team, you're going to be embedded with the Iraqi military. You're going to help them take over their country. It becomes a lot different. And
Mm-hmm.
what was funny is that we end up getting a new master gunnery sergeant, Lily Florin, and another officer. And I would always tell Master Gun Lily Florin that I was like, hey, man, how does it feel to be the replacement player? These are the kind of camaraderie jokes like, hey, man, it's kind of crazy. And so when we got into Iraq, we flew into Habaniya, which is literally TQ is across over a river and over a bridge and a road. So the bridge crosses over a river and it also crosses over another route. And so in order to go from there to Khatam, TQ, you have to gun up. You have to always be on the ready because you never what's going. You could end up in a firefight right there in between two bases. And so we were in Habania. The army was part of it, and then the Ukrainian, then the Iraqis owned the rest of it. So the Iraqis were over there. But when we flew in there at night, we get in these pickups that are that are Toyota pickups, and we're driving forever. And we're driving through trees and all kinds of stuff. And I'm like, what is this place? And why? How can we be driving forever and not really be? Because the base was so big, it was an old British base, and there was a British cemetery there as well. So getting to know this base, getting to know people, and what was funny about it too is literally on my last deployment with Colonel Durant, we actually went into this very area and said, "Hey, we're going to set up the Third Brigade, uh, the Third IA, Iraqi Army, right here."
Mhm.
And they're like, "Cool, cool. That's where we're going to set it up." And here I am embedded with the Third IA. So it was just a very unique transition from the story continues kind of thing. And it was just learning the culture, but I fell in with I was an advisor because these 10 man MIT teams, military Iraqi transition teams, they're an advisor team. They're there to help the Iraqis take over their country. This is just the footprint of how things work. And
Mhm.
I had to learn all kinds of different tactical and just the mechanism of how everything's going to work, especially call for fire and everything else. There was a lot of things that we had to learn as a MIT team that we got trained up on real quick. And it was really interesting, really good stuff because we're going to be out doing all kinds of dangerous stuff. And it was super dangerous, obviously. Um, I was embedded. I was part of Dr. Ahmed's team. Dr. Ahmed was the Iraqi doctor for the battalion, and he'd do a lot of stuff, man. He was always doing med caps, which is medical, um, going out and treating the city, treating the people in the villages,
Okay.
and so we'd have to go out. We'd go on patrols all the time, and some of these patrols, you finally ended up with two Marines or me and a Marine, and the rest your backups Iraqis, and the Iraqis would only take their guns and their ammo, and so they're never prepared for anything. And if we got in a firefight, they would just send every bullet downrange, and so we call it the Iraqi death blossom, and it would be kind of scary because sometimes they'd have negligent discharges, and and so trying to keep these guys in a professional manner, was always getting to be a challenge. And it was good. These guys got better and better all the time. They learned how to take over their country. They learned how to do stuff. But it was always kind of scary, especially when you got me, a Marine, going to check out different places, check out clinics. And their clinics, it was interesting because to see their clinics, to see it set up, was one chair, couple like bandages, and this is their emergency room, and some stuff, man. Just very limited amount of stuff. So we would be taking them medications. We'd be taking them like gear that they might need, some other things, and just trying to keep them functional and doing what
Yeah.
they can with what they've got. It was very limited and very very dirty and not very, I don't know. And they didn't have very many, not too much documentation. I mean, brochures or any kind of books or any kind of things that would help navigate some of that stuff. The best
Mhm.
they had was a poster of teeth on the wall to tell you to brush your teeth, kind of thing. And I took pictures. I took pictures of a lot of this stuff, and a lot of times it was interesting because we want to see how is things progressing. Are they able to do work on homes? Are they able to work functionally on the streets and sell their products? Because you're measuring it out. And we did a lot of you know talk to we brief intel on how the city's doing, how everything's going, just so that they can see if the bad guys are in the area, if they're causing havoc, if it's too scary, they're not going to be working. We're always looking for IDs because the IDs were getting thicker and thicker and more intense. And we finally got to the point where we're like, hey, we're taking 300 mortar rounds a month in our AO, in our area of operation. So we needed
Okay.
to go, and part of our MIT teams, we had a MIT team across the Euphrates River, which was the 3.5s MIT team, Camp Cowboy, and down the river and down the ways. But we also had a MIT team on the other side of the river in the Euphrates, um, not too far away. And so we'd always have to take these army barges. The army ran these barges across the river back and forth. We could drive our vehicles on, take gear and stuff over to them and whatnot, and start doing stuff. So we had to do a whole bunch of crazy logistical things. We had to figure out how to keep these vehicles moving on different directions, different paths, irrigation ditches. A lot of this place looked like Vietnam, not the desert of Iraq, because we're right along the Euphrates River, and they're
Yeah.
irrigating everything. And so what they do is they soak the land, but when they do, they don't use. They just dig a trench across the road, so you can't really drive across that road anymore once they're soaking that. So we would teach them how to, hey, you need to put these pipes in the ground, let all the water go so we can have a bridge that goes across these little areas. So a lot of logistical obstacles to figure out to operate. But we were figuring that, hey, we need to build a patrol base for the Iraqis that all these different areas can kind of navigate to, called Ratib. And so we need to do about a 3 kilometer uh, dig into our territory, our AO. So we're going to be able to run patrols out of that, from that 3 mile kilometer area for 72 hours per platoon or whatever. And then they would get a break. They'd be able to come back to their camps. But we're in the process of building this. And on the first day of the build, I I had noticed some smoke plumes in the background, and I took a lot of pictures. I did a lot of pictures. I checked on a lot of people. Did a lot of really fun stuff with my team. I felt like it was always a challenge. There's always something crazy going on. But I step out on this porch, and I'm looking at these smoke plumes off in the background, and there's a wall up in front of me. There's these pillars, um, and and as I'm taking this picture, um, an explosion goes off right in front of me, about 10 meters in front. That's when a mortar round came in, enemy mortar
Mm.
round, and I took over 100 pieces of shrapnel right there, and I didn't know it at the time. I took one picture and I got it. I was getting ready to take the second, and my finger was probably just a millisecond ready to push that button, and my camera got destroyed from shrapnel. Otherwise, I'd be blind. But one of the Humvees that was right there in front too. I mean, we had a lot of protection, but I took a whole bunch of just different shrapnel to my body. Um, Broke my talus bone. 90% of my tendons and ligaments in my right ankle were either destroyed or damaged. And I remember my hands, and my hands still, I got a lot of tingling in my ring finger and pinky on both hands, because I took shrapnel in the shoulder here, all down my arms, and I could see through the camis starting to bleed through. My thighs are starting to bleed, so I didn't know how bad I was hit.
Mm.
Uh, I took one through the side of my abdomen, and it went up into my chest cavity, but I didn't really know how bad that might be. And I remember I couldn't feel my hands, but I told my mind, I was like, hey, I want to see my hands. My hands came up to my face like this, and I was super frustrated because I'm like, oh, great, I got one finger and a thumb. I'm like, turn so I could see them. And because the mind's working in such a way that it just kind of, oh, you just want to see your hands? Okay, we're just going to throw them to you how they are. so, so everything's just like click, 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 click. And everything kind of slows down and it becomes really methodical. And what happened was my training just had to kick in. I was like, hey, man, I got to strip down. I got to make sure I'm not wounded too much. I need to, see all the wounds. I need to get everything going. And I think I need to put a tourniquet on my on my leg, because my talus bone, I mean my boots just bleeding and looking crazy. So I and literally the shrapnel went through my dog tag and made it look all kind of crazy, but I still have that dog tag with the shrapnel in it. So it's really kind of cool, but it's not, you know. And so when I look at the x-rays, when I look at all these things, I'm always like, it's cool, but it's not. But anyway, I'm laying there on the ground, and I crawl myself way back into the house that we had taken over the night before, along with Dr. Ekmed was standing next to me. He lost an eye, had some other damage, and he got hit as well. bunch of other people got hit. We lost, I think, 2 Iraqis that day. 19 Iraqis got hit. The 46s flew in, snagged us up. But before I left, a Navy SEAL corpsman showed up on deck and cut the tourniquet off me. He's like, "Hey man, you don't need a tourniquet. You just need some pressure dressings." He wrapped me all up, got me all bundled out, and as I'm starting to fly out. And I remember because I was in an arm board in one arm, and I have the tourniquet, I have an IV in this arm or something. And I remember looking at it and the IV slowly making its way out. And I'm thinking, oh, I
Woof.
need all this fluid because I don't know how much blood I'm losing. I don't know what the situation is. So I'm very careful and I watch it as it slides out and I can't do anything. I'm trying to call, the corpsman on the helicopter, but there's 19 of us on there and 10 and 10. And I'm like, but I remember I was like, oh, well, once the IV kind of came all the way out, I just put my arm and said, all right, that's all I'm getting. But I didn't want to have any loss
Wow.
there. But I remember as I'm heading out to the helicopter, these movie scenes kind of kick in your head. And I was like, wow, this is just like the movies. The way the bushes were just kind of moving over, and because the helicopter rotor blades like pushing them down and they're coming back up. And I just remember thinking to myself, I was like, man, this could be it. And I I remember laying on the ground, and I will say when I got feeling to my hands, the very first things I wanted to check to make sure was I still had my family jewels. And so
Yeah.
I could barely feel because my hands were all jacked, but I'm like, oh, okay. Feels like everything's good. Nothing's hit there. All right, I'm good. But if you see the x-ray to the right and left of it, there's shrapnel. Right down the
Wow.
middle, everything's good. So I was like, oh, okay. Um, I think that's just a weird thought that comes through the mind. And I remember thinking to myself, well, I'm going to pray to God now. And, I don't know how it's going to go, but I remember my life kind of flash in front of my face, any regrets, anything that's going on, all the things that happen, how you treat life just flashes in front of your eyes. Did I do it right? And I was comfortable. I was like, hey, you know what? I'm good to go now. If you need it, if you're going to take me, go ahead and take me. If not, I'd like to continue. But I first had to check the jewels first before I had that prayer, because if I didn't have them, it would have went a little bit different. But I don't I don't know why that is.
Yeah.
But I remember flying. We finally got back to TQ, got back into TQ. The helicopters land, and then the Humvees are picking us up to go. And I remember it was super hot. Obviously, and there's certain things that just kind of kick in your mind. And I'm gonna say this because one, it's it's just a natural occurrence, and it's not. I don't know. Society sometimes can look really weird on things, but I'm going to tell you how it is because this is how it is. And you know, I'm very respectable. I'm a respecting person. I really like to value females and everything, but I really appreciate the fact that these nurses showed up. They're going to take care of me, but they didn't have their blouses on, right? So they just had these t-shirts on. And I remember the one nurse had me up against her chest kind of. She's like, "We're going to take care of you." And I all I can remember thinking to myself was, "This might be the last set of tits I ever have my head up against," right? so,
Dude,
so it,
Aaron,
and at the
I'm
same time, let me just finish. At the same time, the last thing that happens before they give you that gas is the
mhm,
doctor's got to put a glove on and stick his finger up your ass, right? And check
really.
to make sure that your sphincter closes down to ensure that you don't have a spinal damage. And I remember telling the story to a nurse one time or somebody else. And she said to me, "It's all about tits and ass with you guys." So
Yeah.
uh it's just, and maybe that's part of it. But at the same time, these are kind of the thoughts that kind of go through your head or my head, and I'm going to own that. And it's just like, wow, but I really, appreciated the fact that everybody started taking care of me. And so now I'm not a corpsman anymore that can take care of other people, and I can't take care of my team. But now I'm in the medical system, and I get to see systematically how the medicine worked. And for me, I felt like it worked very well. It was
Yeah.
very difficult, to be a patient, but at the same time, I was like, I wasn't evaluating the system, but I had a chance to look at it from the outside. And I
Yeah.
will say the only part that kind of bothered me was when we were in Balad, we're we're flying to, we're gonna fly out of Balad. But during that time, I wake up from surgeries or whatever because they're doing surgeries on me. Um, and all of a sudden Balad's getting hit and they're putting a blast blanket over me and they're like doing all this stuff. And I could hear, blast going on and like, somewhere's getting blown up. Boom. You just like, what in the heck? And so as we're getting ready to leave, they put me in the spot. And I remember Sergeant Bray, he also got hit with me at the same time. And his hand looked like he just poured a whole bottle of pepper all over his hand and both hands because they were kind of sitting outside the turret on the gun on the Humvee. The Humvee tires flat, things that kind of they had to they had to fix that thing up, but it managed to take some damage because it was 1131s and the 1131s basically full up armor Humvees. It can actually take a hit and be okay.
Can we
But
I gotta go back to
but as I'm flying out of Balad,
yeah, I
yeah,
was
let me just go
before
over
we
this,
get too
cover this one
far.
point. As I'm getting ready to
Okay.
fly,
Yeah.
yeah,
Go ahead.
well, so we're getting ready to fly out at Balad, and I ask, I'm like, "Hey, I'm not feeling that great. I need to have some vital signs come, taken," because I felt like I was falling apart because they had cut my stomach open. They pulled all my intestines out. They did all this stuff in TQ.
Oh,
I had my last rites read to me, whole bunch of things. At the time, I didn't know. I woke up and the guy's like, "Dude, I've never seen anybody wake up so happy before." I'm like, "Well, I'm kind of a lively dude, but I'm just glad to be here. Am I here?" He's like, "Yeah, you're here." And so I tried to eat and I couldn't eat because I started throwing up. And so they're like, "Oh, we got to put an NG tube in you." So now they're sticking a tube down my nose, down my throat. They lose my ID. They have to take a picture of me. And as we're getting ready to fly out of the country, I'm asking this Air Force. I'm like, "Hey, can you take some vital signs?" And the Air Force medics like, "Yeah, we'll take half your vital signs." I'm like, "Half?" I've never said that to anybody in my life. I said, "What half are you going to take?" And it was just such a crazy thing. So that's a part that I was like, that's the only part of the medicine that I really didn't like. When the Air Force medic was like, "Yeah, we're going to take half your vital signs." I'm
oh,
like, "I'm a corpsman. What half are you taking?" And you know, but when they're getting ready to get me on the plane, they're like, "Do you got your ID?" And I'm like, "Yeah," and it looks exactly like I do right now because I NG tube in there. And it's so funny. They had to take it from like looking at me in the bed. And
yeah.
so it's just some interesting stuff. You wanted to go back to something. What'd you want to go back to?
Yeah, no, so you were talking about, uh and you don't have to feel bad about it, dude. When you got hit and like the female medic or whatever, the nurse grabbed you and it's like, you ever watch The Pacific?
Yes.
All right, so when I'm having a blank on the dude's last name, the redhead guy, he goes to, like he like has incontinence, he's like peeing himself in, so I go back to the doctor and whatnot, and on one of the other islands, and he just like the scene, it just shows this nurse girl walking around with all the injured Marines and sailors, uh, and it just kind of like pauses on her, showing that he's like staring at her, and I think that uh, it's hard to explain unless there's someone who's been through something like you, or when you've been in places where there just are no women for months, and just how special and comforting a woman is just by being a woman, like that you would take for granted here when you see them all the time. And uh, I think I believe in God, and I think that women were they're a beautiful creation, man, and it's not just like a chauvinistic that they're pretty. It's like it's different, and unless you have been in situations like we have, and especially you, a very extreme one, like you can't understand that. But if you ever watch The Pacific and how he's like staring at her, like it's that's like how it is. You're like, wow, like that's incredible. That's a beautiful thing, It's like so that's not. I don't think that's weird or anything like that, man. I think it's very normal.
Yeah, it's super special for me to have those thoughts, right? And
Mhm.
to have shared those thoughts in my mind and to open it up and kind of put it out here like this. It's not, yeah, I don't do it to, it wasn't to be chauvinistic. It was to be appreciative on on a level that most people today might not understand. Like you said, they'll be like, "Ah, chauvinistic pig. What is he talking
Yeah.
about?" These things can be totally taken out of context, and
Mhm.
and if it is, it is. But that's not my intent, and it's great that you brought it up in that way because it's such a true, special thing, and females are special and need to be treated as such. And that's the other part is that, everybody's like equalization, and it's not about equalization as much as it is, when you mix men and women together, you're going to have issues because men are attracted to women or women are attracted
Mhm.
to men or, and now it's like men are attracted to men, women to women, but the dynamic definitely changes when you put women and men together, even in
Yeah.
warrior groups. I mean, as much as I want to have a warrior group and be able to say, "Hey," and I run warrior groups, I want to mix women and men. I can do it, but I don't really
Mhm.
want to do it all the time because men need to be able to speak like men in a way, and instead of apologizing for their language or
Mhm.
that you don't apologize for your language when you're together with your guys. And so
Yeah.
I see that that dynamic changes. So if you don't think there's a difference, if you think you can just throw things together and make it work, you can, but then you create a lot of different problems. And that's just, that's just the way it is. It's the way it's always going to be. Uh, as much as you want to think that it's not happening, unfortunately, and it's very sad, military sexual trauma is a true thing and it's going on. And I had a gal
Yeah.
on my show that talked about that. And, you know, you put a bunch of guys together and only a few women, it causes some issues. Same thing might happen
Mhm.
if you put a bunch of women together and guys, but that's not the way the military works, and it's not the way life has worked. Hard labor, hard work has always, for the most part, been everything's built on this planet by mostly men. Women can do it too. I'm not saying that they can't. It's not. I'm not saying that they shouldn't be there. I'm just saying the dynamic changes.
Yeah.
And if
Yeah,
you want to
that's
say it
real.
doesn't, I will tell you, you're full of crap. It's just like someone saying, "Hey man, I got a cure for PTSD." I'm like, "What? Mind wipe?" Because you have to take away all my memories. You have to take away the traumatic memory. I still have it. Do I manage it well? Absolutely. You wanna know why? Because 'Cause I'm engaged in my care. I'm engaged in, this podcast. I'm engaged in, warrior groups from the PTSD Foundation of America, Warrior Built PTSD Foundation. Whatever it is, I'm engaged in it, and I'm
Yeah.
engaged in me, and I'm also engaged in the community of veterans, and if you wanna deal with your PTSD on a better level, you can do that. But if you wanna say, "Oh, I got a cure for your PTSD," good luck.
No.
Because I mean, I really
That's
don't want it to, and part of me doesn't want
that's
it
a
to be cured
daily.
because it's also made me for who I am. It's given me a different purpose. It's maybe I'm more aware. It takes a lot of energy to have PTSD. But at the end of the day, if I wasn't aware, I might not be safe today, or I might not be safe tomorrow because I don't care about crossing the street and being on my phone because I
Mhm.
didn't learn to be aware. I'm not
Yeah.
saying I'm not saying PTSD is a good thing. I'm just saying sometimes it's a prevention of death, and sometimes it
Yeah.
is death. So
I
it's a double edged sword.
I got, diagnosed a few months ago, and like first I think it's I have a friend who just went through and is like transitioning out, and he was just in Kuwait during the stuff with Iran. And he was also on my last deployment with me in Syria. And like that was my fourth deployment, and I haven't seen as much combat as you. But we had these like cluster munitions come in, which was the most scared I've ever been in my life for sure. And he's like, dude, this was like this was next level. This was like a real war. Like other than, troops in contact, right? But like the munitions coming at him and all these things with the ballistic missiles and so different. Like even Syria a couple years ago was so different than when like we went and earlier on, and with drones and rockets and all. It's just very different, man. It's so weird. having done it the other way 3 times, and, you know, I think it's important to talk about this stuff and just be very real about it and, um, like, how depending on how severe your experiences are and what they were different, everybody's different, like, my PTSD has been just, like, I'm like stuck in operational mode because you got to stay alive and be ready at any moment. And somehow, like this last deployment got me like stuck in that. So I have to tell myself like all day, like, don't clench your teeth and be like, I gotta go, 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 Like that's a real thing for me every day. And then I have to like tell myself to fully relax. And in those moments, like if I'm sitting somewhere with my 2 little kids, I got 2 little ones right now, and fully enjoy the moment and like the sun's hitting you and I feel my body fully relax. I'm like, oh man, this is nice. You um I I feel bad because I have friends who like have it so much more severe and then uh, like I can't imagine what that's like, man. But I've seen a lot of progress. I've seen friends who uh would be doing pretty good, but like they if they drink it all, dude, they just are gone. They get to a point they're inconsolable and they stop drinking and are like, doing better. So like knowing yourself, how to manage it and finding those tools. And yeah, I'd really love to start digging into this now, especially like I haven't had anyone tell that
Definitely,
much of
definitely. Yeah, let's
a real story of legitimate severe trauma where like you're having surgeries to stay alive and coming out of that. And then now you're
yeah,
like
let me
full force into all these organizations doing great stuff. So like let's roll with that, man. I'm excited about this part too.
yeah, let's go down this road real quick. So I finally, to come back to the United States was kind of a crazy ride, right? I'm on a C-117 or a C-17, and we finally and I'm going to be one of the first guys going to Balboa. But what happened
Oh,
is they fly us into Walter Reed, and I fly in, to Walter Reed with a couple of, other people. Doc Jacobs is a good example of a guy. If you ever talk to him, he's in San Diego doing some incredible stuff. He's put together a lot of things, tried to keep his legs as long as he could, had to go through a
mhm,
lot of different things. But, he flew in at the same time I did. And he was at Walter Reed. I mean, he was at Bethesda when I got there. That's when I ran into him because he got blown up a couple days before me. Uh,
okay.
and but we're gonna take this journey. But what happened is I fly into Walter Reed. They do all these dressing changes. They're doing all this work on me, and I have this epidural, which is basically to cut off the feeling to your lower legs because it's basically a, a, a a needle into your spine a little bit. And but and then it has these two tubes that hook up, a female and a male. They hook up, and what happened was well, it's still hooked up, but it comes away from the hose. So the hose is by itself, and there's no way to like put it back together without the possibility of infection. And they're like, "Hey, we don't have the capabilities here at Walter Reed, so we're going to call an ambulance, and it's going to come pick you up from Bethesda." So then I get to
Whoa.
Bethesda, and it's a long. I mean, it's like a 2 hour, 3 hour drive. I don't know, but it takes me to Bethesda. I'm there at Bethesda, and I roll in there like a race car. Uh, and there's a whole bunch of people, taking the tires off, making sure everything's good. It's all these doctors, they show up. They're like, "Hey, I got to check this out. I got to check that out. We got to pull blood. We got to do this, and that." And so they're doing all this work on me. And then they're like, "Oh, yeah, you got all this shrapnel in your bones and this, and that. We got to put you on the x ray table." And so they're taking x rays of me till like
Like,
4 o'clock in the morning. And they got me in all kinds of positions. And they're definitely anxious to look at my ankle and my ankle from all kinds of different things. They're like, "Oh yeah, we got to do some surgery at 6 in the morning." So I'm like, "Oh, good, because I can't wait till I get a nap." This is ridiculous. So in my mind, that's how I'm thinking. I like this really kind of crazy thought. And so I wake up from that and they're like, "Oh yeah, we had to clean that out. We're gonna have to do a couple more surgeries." So for the next couple of days, I had some more surgeries because they had to clean it out. They were worried about the talus bone being completely broken across. It had a hairline fracture across, but it had a chunk taken out of it. So Bethesda was pretty set up. They took really good care of me. They start looking at stuff. They also, find out that I'm dealing with MRSA, and so they have to
Is that a
do
blood infection?
some. It's a super powerful um, infection of the blood, and this is what was killing a lot of guys coming back from war. But they started looking at it a lot more extensively. So at that point, they got to put a pick line in me, and basically goes right to my heart, 3 inches from the heart. Every 8 hours, I got to hook myself up to an IV bag and give myself, the most powerful antibiotic that they got. So that had to be monitored for, I think it was 4 weeks. I had to do this or something like that. And so, so at Bethesda, they're doing a good job on a lot of things. And I got visited by a lot of different people, and Stevie Nicks came to visit me and ended up giving me
Ooh,
a at the time like an iPod full of music from whatever music she put on there. Just thousands of hundreds of little music, you know, videos. So the iPod was before, you got, for those of you that don't know, it's like the precursor to the iPhone before the iPhone had the ability to run your music and do all these things. So the iPod, you just took it up and it was like next in line right after the CD player. Kind of it's pretty cool.
they were awesome
And
rivals.
yeah. So, that was cool. And spent some time talking to me and stuff and visiting some other veterans and different things. And it was great. But I remember that part. And then it was time for me to get on the plane with a whole bunch of other veterans, including Doc Jacobs. And we flew to Bethesda. We were part of the first crew of people allowed, or veterans or members of the military allowed to use I think it was the C5 or C7 part of Bethesda, the hospital there, allowed, just finally got their ability to start taking care of patients that were coming back from war. And
Okay.
Wounded Warrior Battalion West was starting to stand up, and they created a, a portion in the building there to take on patients once you get discharged from the hospital. You need a place to kind of heal and go through, because you're going to have still many appointments throughout the day, physical therapy, um, wound care, all this stuff. And
Hmm.
you know since I had my last rites read to me, they had to cut my stomach open, pull all my intestines out, put me back together. I had this giant scar going down the middle of my abdomen, and I have a hernia too that I got to push in all the time. A lot of times you'll see me just kind of pushing on it and pushing it over. So, it helps move the intestines back to where they're supposed to be instead of like coming out of some sort of area. But I had that repaired as well. And, in 2008, I got that repaired, but, it didn't take. In plastic surgery, I finally got that to the cut that was all the way down my abdomen. That worked out really good as well. So I want to say overall, my medicine was really good. I remember the doctor saying, "Hey, we're going to do 8 holes or 7 holes, and we're going to fix your hernia." And he came out of the surgery. He's like, "You made me earn my money today." Took 17 holes, 2 pieces of mesh, Kevlar mesh. And so I figure I'm kind of bulletproof right now, but I'm not quite sure, nor do I want to put that to the test. But this is all, from being I finally got kind of tossed around. And this is, when you come back and you try to figure out what you can and can't do. And we always want to get back in our unit. I wanted to go back to 3rd Battalion, 5th Marines, and check in. And I was basically at that point like limited duty at this time because I can't walk. My talus bone, all this stuff healing, it's having a lot of problems. And they're like, "Hey, uh, we're gonna send you to this unit and that unit." They're going to TAD me to TPU, which is down in San Diego. But I asked TPU, I said, "Hey, I live in Lake Elsinore. Can you send me back to Pendleton to a place where I can just kind of work?" So they let me come back. And I started doing a lot of stuff with the MIT teams um, and whatnot. But as I went to go get my medical records and all my records from 1st Marine Division and transfer, they're like, "You're no longer part of the unit anymore." I'm like, "Well, who am I part of?" So what they did is they took me off the EDVR, which is the Enlisted Distribution Management Report, which is kind of like saying, "Hey, you live here at 1st Marine Division. You are part of 3rd Battalion, 5th Marines. But in order to get another body, they're like, "Hey, we got to get rid of you." But when you get rid of somebody, you usually put them somewhere else. And
Mhm.
because I was kind of like in limbo, they just took me out and was like, "Hey," but they gave me all my stuff, but it just felt really weird to be kind of like, "Hey, you're here today, gone tomorrow," kind of thing. And it broke. I remember breaking down in tears and being like, "Hey, man, I'm no longer part of. I still belong to 3-5 if I want to, because I don't belong to anybody else." So I went back
Mhm.
to my chief at the working for the MIT team guys and this and that at G10, and I said, "Hey, I guess I don't need to be here because I don't belong to anybody anymore. I I should just go home." I didn't say that, but in my mind, I was thinking like, "Hey, if I don't belong to anybody, uh, who's going to count me?" But it took Master Chief Hughes to go through, fix some pay issues, fix some other things, get me attached to some other, and I ended up at dental battalion for a little while. Ended up with like 7 different units that I was TAD to, before they finally said, "Hey, you know what? We need to put you at Wounded Warrior Battalion West, um, as somebody that can kind of help out other veterans as well as this and that, as well as being attached to them as a patient." So I was a patient slash staff attached to Wounded Warrior Battalion West, and I was given a very special designation in the military, which was um, full duty with limitations, not worldwide assignable, and retire at 20. So this allowed me to pick up the rank of chief and continue on, but my ankle didn't allow me to do some things. Even though I tried to push it, I was in pain a lot, had to take a lot of naproxen. Um, I don't like to take any narcotics, any kind of other drugs. Matter of fact, they gave
Yeah.
that to me for 5 days when I got blown up, and I was like, "Nah, I can't be in this mindset like this." I said, "I'll just go with naproxen." And the reason why naproxen
Yeah.
I went with is because it's a 12 hours of support versus 4 to 6. You're taking Motrin left and right, and I just, even though naproxen can be difficult, I mean, all these NSAIDs are definitely not good for your body. And as it is now, I very rarely take it if unless I absolutely have to. But I really try not to push myself into these zones where I have to. So I have to modify my workouts and work around my injuries. The the shrapnel that just caused this hernia. I had to I got it fixed, but obviously it gave way, so I have to deal with that again. Probably get it fixed someday. Um, but I'm not really big on going into surgery. The reason why too is I had a lot of buddies at Wounded Warrior Battalion West even, uh, that went into surgery and didn't come out. Some of them just didn't come out of surgery. So I'm a little bit
Oh.
a lot of anxiety going into surgery, and it's not like I don't want to discourage anybody from doing that, but or to be like me. I'm not saying that, but it's important to kind of, that's one of those maybe PTSD side of things of me that I have to always deal with, and I'm always kind of,
Mhm.
I have no problem being a corpsman and giving shots to anybody, but I'm not a guy that likes shots. I get a little woozy and crazy about it, so it's kind of
Oh.
weird. It's just one of those crazy things. Um, but yeah, it's just a. But when I got put at Wounded Warrior Battalion West as a patient slash staff, I got Kevin Barger. He served with me in Fifth Marines, because he was up there at the regiment with me, and him and I were good buddies. He also got orders to come down there and be the corpsman uh, for Wounded Warrior Battalion West, and that became kind of a really cool thing. Um, I was able to do a lot of really cool stuff. I was able to see a lot of nonprofits pour in there and make things happen. Really great people that came in, wanted to do incredible things, and the battalion really got to do a lot of flexible stuff for a while until headquarters Marine Corps, everybody else kind of tightened things down. But at the same time, Wounded Warrior Battalion West was established to kind of pull all these limited duty guys and limited duty guys out of their units to allow them to heal together, kind of move forward in some really cool directions. And I was part of that. I got to train in the underwater treadmill. I was part of the reason why that got put into the battalion, because the underwater treadmill I felt was such a great piece of gear for, not only does it massage your area, your wounds, but it goes down to a certain level, and then you can walk, you can run, you can turn, you can left, right, lateral limits, whatever, moving your body in a way that you couldn't on land, and you couldn't maybe do it because of your injuries. So it obviously took off a lot of weight, it massaged the shrapnel, the areas. I mean, it was just such a piece of gear. I remember telling the Navy was like, I was like, "Hey, can you pay for me because I'm going to Tri-City Wellness Center and they're pro bono in this, but they're need can you establish a program that would be beneficial for our service members to use?" And they're like, "Oh no, that's a novelty item. You can go down to Balboa and run up and down on the pool there." And I'm like, "That's not even close to even being what this underwater treadmill is all about." I'm like,
Yeah.
until you try it, you don't know. So there was a lot of weird shifts that the Marine Corps was able to do because they put it in to the Wounded Warrior Battalion West. And the Navy was like, no, you can't do that because you're not allowed to be a medical provider. And they're like, well, we're not doing it for medical reasons. It's for training. And so I was like, hey, my CO, you know, he made that happen. And yeah, it was just there's a lot of weird things that kind of went into that. And there's a lot of weird things that I saw. I remember the Navy Surgeon General coming down, and because Wounded Warrior Battalion West had in the first 2 years, we had 5 suicides because we didn't have a very good mental health facility. We didn't have a very good mental health buildup. We didn't have a lot of support medically. They were like, "Oh, you need to get your medicine wherever wherever your unit's at." And these guys were driving all over the place to do their medical. And we're like, "Hey, the hospital's right here. We put it right here. Let's make the hospital. The hospital needs to be operating in a hospital way to cover these guys because this is the unit that's right here." And it, and then the Marine Corps was pushing so many cool directions to make the medicine work for these guys. And even though they didn't they weren't medical guys. They were wanting to make sure these guys get treated the way that they needed to. It was standing up for a reason. It was a huge push. So the Surgeon General came down. He's like, I just want to remind everybody, and there's only one reason you have to say this, is that it's still Navy medicine, not Marine Corps medicine. And I'm like, yeah, you have to say this because you as the Navy isn't necessarily standing up to do enough for the guys that were injured. Prime example of that, I was sitting at a chief's mess, eating my lunch one day, and I have a senior chief tell me this one comment real loud in front of everybody. Hey, you need to quit promoting the Wounded Warrior Battalion West to our corpsmen over here that are also wounded and ill and injured, that also should have the right to go there if they served with the Marine Corps. And I was like, promoting this is taking care of our sailors for one. And if you don't want to, if you want to deny the package, feel free to deny it. But don't tell me to not help our service members. So I took a real big offense to it. And I had a chief that really pushed me well at the battalion at Wounded Warrior Battalion West. She was the second chief there. The first chief was just kind of a reservist chief who's there for a short period of time, and then I came in as a first class. I picked up chief because she pushed me to really push for the chief's community, and luckily I made it. And Melanie Fisher was just an outstanding person to make that happen. Kevin Barger, he was like, "Hey man, I'm not leaving here until you pick up chief anyway. So I'm not getting out." And so he was huge at making that happen too. Um, yeah, there's just a lot of people that really had my back in a lot of different ways, and I was glad to have theirs too. I was glad to be part of such a cool process as the Wounded Warrior Battalion West. And then First Sergeant Nick Ham, he came on deck. He was all he got blown up too, and he ended up taking over a good position and running a whole bunch of programs. And we'd have hundreds of motorcycles on deck sometimes and doing stuff at having picnics and barbecues at the battalion and helping the service members move forward in so many cool directions down at Balboa as well because that's where he started.
I was
And then he
listening
started
to your episode with Brandon Quaid talking about that.
yeah, Brandon has a great yeah. If you listen to my episode about Brandon Quaid, he'll tell that story. He's got some wild stories, and he'd put together such good. That's Quaid Harley Davidson, out of SoCal, Redlands, and he's always making things happen for our veterans. He's on the board with Warrior Build, and he's really adamant about making things happen for our vets. So it's good.
Yeah. So you meet Nick there. I was gonna guess you did. And then so tell us about your transition, like going from all that and you end up retiring. and then tell us about what that was like and what you're doing now.
Yeah, it was, transition was kind of a scary thing. I actually remember, like, going through, like, wow, my 20 years is up. I was super crazy, and now I gotta check out, and, I was starting my checkout procedure, and, I think I just started breathing, like, super, like, shallow, and, at one point, I almost passed out because I was, like, looking at these things and, like, trying to navigate my mind, like, "Hey, I'm about ready to step out of the military," and it kinda hit me, but I was breathing, like, super shallow, like, and almost, passed out. I was like, "Whoa, what happened?" And I was like, I started taking some deep breaths, and I'm like, "What is wrong?" And so I was having, like, this panic attack, so I learned finally what that kinda was like, and, but I was like, "Whoa, this is real. I'm gonna step out." So I, but I have a plan. When I step out, I still want to. Jim Gallardi. Let me tell you about this guy. I mean, when I came to the battalion, he was the first guy that I met. He was actually the first guest speaker at the Wounded Warrior Battalion West Marine Corps Ball, and he is a four-time Purple Heart guy from Vietnam, and he was there to always help guys out. He was there for warrior groups that we would do. He would do, um, and I said, "Hey, man, when I get out, I want to be just like you." And he started going to the underwater treadmill with me all the time. He was adamant about helping, the battalion out, meeting all the COs, that went through, and I went through a lot of them. I think I went through 5 COs before I finally retired, and and it was just really an interesting thing, uh, to step out, try to figure out what I was going to do, but I was able to just retire, and I started by I tried to pace myself a little bit easy, and I wanted to. I worked for the school district for a little while as a substitute. Um, uh, wherever I needed special needs kids, and being the monitor, like a sign holder for stopping cars and all this stuff. And I remember, like, adapting to the situation was difficult because usually it's ran by moms and females that are there doing stuff, right? But they're like, "Oh, we need more males in here, and we need you to, this is the way we do stuff." And you know, if you have to send a kid to the principal's office, you hand them this ticket, and they have to go see the principal, and this, and that, and so, and then they're like, "Hey, your phone's going to ring at 5 o'clock in the morning. You can, pick or choose which thing you want to do." And so I didn't like that part because I was like, "Man, I don't need my phone to ring every day." So I ended up telling like all these people that I ended up meeting. I was like, "Hey, if you need me to take over for you, or you're going to take something, just send me a text, and I'll tell you if I can or can't do it." And so it became
Mhm.
a lot easier because it was like, "Hey, we need you for this person or that person." And I was like, "All right, cool." So I didn't even use that call in thing, that method. I would accept their thing. I'd call in and be like, "Hey, here's the number for, so and so that's leaving." Ended up making it like way better for me. And then the other thing I did was to go to the principal of every school that I went to and say, "Hey, how about if I run into kids that need to see you, I'll give you a list at the end of the day. Otherwise, I feel like I need to just give these kids some guidance and be like, hey, you need to stop what you're doing. It's all about managing personalities." Super easy. It was like super cool. And it was just different. And then they also needed me to monitor the line. So I came up with all these programs, like all these kids had front of the line privilege, like passes, right? But the ones that would cut, I would give them a special pass. I'd be like, "Hey, you just earned into the line privileges." so so the kids finally started getting in line, and they're like, "Oh man, you really managed this line real easy." And so I don't know, man, just things became super interesting for me in that fashion. But I also had to pace myself. I had to sit down a lot because of my shrapnel injuries. I tried to figure stuff out, and I usually only worked the 4-hour shifts, because I also had, VA appointments and things of that nature. So I had to take into consideration all my injuries, all my stuff, and it just ended up being pretty cool. And at the same time, it was, still satisfying. And I even got accused of saving some kid from some car that came across, when I was holding the sign up, and apparently I stand in front of the car and stopped it. But I mean, really, I only remember like a car maybe going like 4 feet before it saw me and then it stopped. But the story that was told was like, the biggest fish I ever caught. And I was like, I was like, I don't remember saving any kid. I remember cars like maybe went 4 feet past they're like, oh, I got to stop. Oh, shoot, let me stop. Cause I made it, obviously I made my presence pretty well known on the road and I kept it pretty good. I would be like, hey, you need to stop, kind of emotional kind of things, but not anything crazy. And I was like, what? I got accused of saving some kid. So crazy stuff like that. And then I was still doing a lot of stuff with Warrior Built because, Nick Ham was like, hey, we need to do this Warrior Built thing. And he got this shop, sponsored by Monster Energy, Miller Welding Equipment, Snap On, so many cool sponsors, uh, you know, Rugged Radio, just so many different, Baja Designs, so many cool things as he was getting ready to do some stuff. And, we got the shop up and running and it was designed for vocational recreational support for our combat vets. And we ended up with a vet that was not doing so good. And we were trying to find a place to send him. But what happened was I started looking at all these other nonprofits. I started being asked to go to places and see people and meet with people. And so I met with this guy, two guys, Paul Luska, from Icon Builders, building company, survey company out of San Diego, and Tom Gibbons, who is darts only golf now, and does a lot of golf tournaments for the nonprofits that I'm part of. And so he always wanted to raise money, but they also wanted to put the PTSD Foundation of America in Southern California somewhere. And I said, hey, it'd be perfect if we could put part of it in a way in the Warrior Built facility. And so they came down, they took a look at it. Graystar got involved with Graystar's largest apartment management company in the world. And they brought some guys in deck to build the facility up. So we ended up with a full-on music studio and we ended up with a lounge so that we could run warrior groups out of there. And so it became kind of a really cool place. But we also ran into a guy that really needed to go to Camp Hope, which is in Houston, Texas, which is the PTSD Foundation of America's place where we send our combat vets to get better for 6 to 9 months free. And so we put that facility in, we put that the capability there, and then we sent this guy down to Texas, and he called me up. He's like, "Hey, Chief, they need you to come up here. They want you to go through their curriculum. They want you to do this," because I was running warrior groups out of Warrior Built just to help a couple of veterans out, and at the time, but they called me down there. I went down there for like 12 days, got schooled up on their process through the combat trauma healing manual and other really cool things that they were doing, and got to see how and what they're doing for our veterans. And so I came back and they wanted me to work for them and do that. So I do that 20 hours a week, just navigating veterans left and right. And I've done that ever since 2012. I want to say I started. And so I reach out to combat vets all day long and spend a lot of time helping those guys navigate certain things. And then also invite them into the warrior groups, which I provide Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday of every week. And if they need to go, then we'll work on sending them to Camp Hope. A lot of these guys, they just need that camaraderie. They need to be able to be part of something, and they come into the groups and they get puzzle pieces put together. They get that camaraderie piece. They get to talk and say things that they need to say, and they get to blow off steam and just learn to navigate whatever they're going through, and to be involved in themselves as well as me. I get a lot out of it. I get to be there. I get a lot of puzzle pieces, the aha moments. I'm just a humble guy trying to and lucky to be in a position where I get to meet and deal with a lot of nonprofit organizations, a lot of businesses that want to hire our veterans, to a lot of support along the way. I don't ask for too many things, but when I need it, I usually ask, and I reach out to certain elements of that. And then one day, Brian Colburn, who basically is a Marine, he's a Marine, and he's basically a jack of all trades, and he's a podcast guy and he's a film guy, and he taught me how to use my camera, and he taught the veterans, brought a whole camera class down to Warrior Built for a long period of time. And he was the secretary. He helped build the website for Warrior Built, did a whole bunch of things. And he was one of our sponsors, Voodoo Tactical, and he would hook us up with some gear and make sure that we had some awesome stuff to go to the races with and different things of that nature, and some of the operational stuff that we did, and donations and different things of that. But he's like, "Hey, Chief, you need to be a podcaster. You need to tell your story, man. You got too many stories. You got too many things. You got a lot of veterans going through a lot of stuff." And I was like, "All right, well, I'm not a podcaster, but I'll play one in real life sometimes." And so so I'm on episode 288, I believe. I just finished up doing one a
Dang.
week, and took a year off from really the podcasting piece up until earlier or late last year. And we started podcasting again. And Brian Colburn from SitchRadio.com manages that for me. And we put a good package together. I got a co-host that's Chef JB Brown. He's a world-renowned chef. He just got selected as Chef of the Year here in the Las Vegas area. He's already in the
Wow.
Hall of Fame for chefs. That's the biggest accomplishment. But he's been nominated 12 times for Chef of the Year, and he finally got it here in Vegas. That's kind of like a really good thing. So I'll be going to a dinner with him on the 30th for that presentation. And so I get to be involved with a lot of cool things. And he's with the Veterans Transition Resource Center. I am as well. I'm a member of it now, and on the board. So I serve on the board of many nonprofits and things that I believe in. And there's plenty of nonprofits that I haven't seen that I truly believe in too. And I love to promote them on my podcast. Businesses promote those, veteran organizations, whatever. Families, if that's family, spouses, if they want to get on and tell their story. I think there's a lot to be told. It's I'm finding it more and more interesting. A lot of treatment facilities, a lot of treatment things that are going on. I like to bring that to the forefront, and it's great to be on your show. To be kind of talking about this in a way that I haven't talked about even on my podcast. I don't spend this much time talking. I spend a much more time listening to somebody else telling their story. Because up front, I told my stories, and I want to say I've probably gotten way better at telling my story in some aspects, and maybe I kind of glide over a lot of the details because um, the burden of the combat situation is mine, so it doesn't always translate right when I'm telling the story or trying to tell the story. And maybe I sugarcoat it, not on purpose. It's just an automatic safety button for the rest of the world, so they don't have to necessarily
Yeah, I think that
feel sorry for me, or whatever it might be.
I
Or be
think the way
scared, or
that the way you told it today will, people who have been through similar experiences, it will resonate with them so they can get some, relating out of it. And for us who have not been injured like that and got, wondered if this is it, it's eye-opening and good to know to help us understand our brothers and sisters who have gone through that. I really admire your journey and number one, just the honesty of this podcast. Like I've always we haven't spent a ton of time together, but when I met you and when we talk and I haven't seen you in a while, but just the genuine type of person you are, that's what our values at Bunker Bros are: community support and strength, and I think you embody all of those big time. You're just a great person in the in the veteran network, and I wanted you to be on here to tell that story and show that no matter what you're going through, you can keep rolling and then be an asset, continue to be an asset, and it will fulfill you back. And it's good to see that with your story, and really appreciate you coming on, Aaron. Um, so it'll be cool to put this out. We're not at episode 220 something. I think this will be 37 with you, but it's been cool to be in this space and just connecting everyone. And so, yeah, make sure everyone check out Warrior Belt. check out Combat Vet Vision Aaron's podcast and just keep tabs on him. He's always involved in a lot of great things. Don't forget to hit bunker-bros.com. You can get some merch from us that's going to help us build the Bunker app so we can keep this community growing and connect everyone across the country. There are 11 million tech-enabled veterans across the country that we can connect and really link resources and build each other up and rebuild communities together because you'll be able to find other people near you that you can relate to. Help us do that and we'll just keep growing together. Thanks, Aaron, for coming on, and we'll see you guys next time.
Yeah, can I say just a couple more things real quick? We got
Sure.
time?
Of
Okay.
course.
Just something to keep in mind, I do this a lot, and I would say, it's hard to navigate everything that's going on out there. There's plenty of veterans that I've let down because I've taken on too much, or I think I can do something.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. All right, Aaron. Thanks, guys. We'll see you next time.